go start with the the land stuff.
Okay, cool.
It started restreaming. Hopefully it should start working. I'll just go and quickly check.
Cool beans. Okay, so let's see. Maybe I'm going to collect some ideas for this session on the board and just going to see if I can set it up so you can see it. Yeah, probably like that. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is about choosing land for a permaculture project. So as I said, this was something that was requested by one of the members, by Sarah. So yeah, maybe a good way to start with this is just to see in general, like if this is an issue shared by other people as well. So maybe just kind of like a hands up, like in the group, who is looking for land at the moment for a project? See Wim. I see Sarah, she's already asked about it. And yeah, so maybe for the rest of you, who here has already found their land for their permaculture project? Yeah. Okay, I know Shilpa, you've got a place. I know Marta, you've got a place. I know you've got a place, Joe, you're working on. So yeah, we've got kind of a mix of experience of people who are looking for a place and people who've already got one.
No,
okay. Yeah, so let's begin maybe, about thinking about some of the considerations. So it's in a nice position because there's a lot of you here who've already found land. So you kind of already have an idea, maybe we can collect different things that could be helpful to looking at this. So yeah, maybe what we want to think about first is if we're talking about a permaculture project, like what kind of project could we be talking about? Like permaculture is a big thing. So within that, like what kind of projects might we be thinking about? And you can also just type something in the chat, Sarah.
I mean, invariably, it will always involve food growing. So
Yeah.
some kind of food growing opportunities. And so for that, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I'd be wanting, are you looking also at solutions, or what we've been looking for to help?
Yeah, we can go in different ways. I was thinking first to look at the different kinds of projects and then the considerations, but yeah, we can do it all in one go. Can you see what I'm writing on the board there? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, go for it, Rakesh. We've got food growing.
Yes. So if it's for food growing, then invariably, if you're in Northern Hemisphere, you want anything from kind of flat to south-facing spaces. And for me, the kind of ideal scenario is if I do have some kind of a hill, which includes a kind of north-facing and a south-facing hill. I'd want a piece of land where I know that I can have forest on my north slope. I would then create some kind of either a forest or a food forest at the very top. So that way I know that I'm going to be, my forest on the northern slope will be finding the water courses, and therefore as it sucks the water up the hill, I know that I'm always going to have spring water on my land on the north side because of that forest. And also because the water is really high, it means that I've got water fairly high up on the south face as well. And because I've got a forest on the very top, or a food forest, I know that's going to be continuously supplying nutrients. And as those nutrients come down the hill, I can be catching it on the south side and therefore feed my food growing spaces automatically. So for me, that's kind of the first thing that I'd be looking for, is that opportunity to really have that forest, north side and on top And then there's 100 other reasons as to why that just really works. So that's my first thing is, so then I've got enough nutrients, I've got enough water, got enough shade, I've got spring water, I've got, the most essential parts of everything that I need. The house and stuff can come later.
Cool. So yeah, that's kind of like looking first at the landform and then using that as a way of organizing the elements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what kind of other projects maybe would we be looking at, and how would that be useful? So we've kind of looked a bit at the land and food growing. What about kind of other sides of permaculture? So what about people? If we're planting the people, like if we want to have a project that has an audience that interacts with people, what kind of things are we going to need to think about in that situation?
Yeah, for us, what we are planning is a combined forest garden with a like a tiny house community.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the plans. We want to create a place where the people can take care of the food growing part of the land.
Cool. So if you're planning a permaculture project where you're going to have a community, what kind of things are you going to need to think about in that case?
I suppose how to how to make decisions with each other.
Yeah, so maybe that's more about the kind of organizing of it, like that's kind of, yeah, like the kind of abstract structures. But maybe if you're thinking about a community, so like what about the location? If you're going to have a community, do you need to think about where this land is going to be in vicinity to other places? So in terms of like where people are going to work, what social kind of connections they need, what kind of access to local facilities and resources. So kind of if you think about the kind of people interactions you're going to have on the land, that's also going to be useful. You know, like if you're going to have a retreat, maybe you want to be in a kind of remote place. Maybe if you want to have a social project where you're working with children or you're working with certain groups, you want to be close to those target groups. Maybe if you're if you've got a community, you want to think about, you know, like what's going to be the kind of economic base for the people living in the community. Are you going to be kind of making your income from the land? Do you need to be close to cities or to other kind of facilities for it to be viable? Maybe if you're in the middle of nowhere and people need to kind of access work or education that's not within the community, that's going to be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've got things, yeah, like if we've got community, so we've got kind of like location, we've got nearby facilities. Okay, and then yeah, if we started looking with Rakesh, so we've already got kind of the landform, we've kind of mentioned water. What kind of other things do we need to think about in terms of the land to be easy to start a project there?
One of the things that we had to consider, and I'm not sure if it's different in other countries, but we wanted to be able to do certain things that are not allowed or difficult to do in within city limits, like compost toilets and other things. And yet we still wanted to work with the communities where most of the population are, And so we kind of like went right outside the city limits. So that way it's kind of, we were able to do an example, but still not, it's still accessible, not too far. So I guess look at your regulations of what kind of things you want to build, and whether it might mean for you to move out for the city or something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we want to kind of think about like the legal implications, because yeah, as Marta's saying, there's some things that you can only do in certain places. If you've got very very strict guidelines that could really restrict what you're doing. That could also be an opportunity to be creative. But yeah, that's a thing that's, I think, important to research and to see, you know, where is there flexibility and where is it very rigid. So, you know, if you want to think in the beginning about planning permission, if you're going to buy a piece of land with intent to start a project, to build something, and you don't have planning permission, that's going to cause you a lot of headaches and a lot of kind of paperwork in the beginning, rather than kind of being clear about what's possible with that. So yeah, that's a big theme. So you've got like the general planning permission, then you've got like regulations, you've got things about like sanitation. In some places you've got like really a lot of kind of legal things about how you build the house, about kind of what insulation you have, about where you've got your drainage, so that you may be obligated to have a flush toilet. So that's, yeah, like a big category to look into. So Sarah's asking, is it important to think of soil or water resources? Not many hills up here in Norfolk. What would you look for on flat land? So yeah, maybe with the question of soil, I think one thing that's quite useful in this case, if we're talking about like, you know, what's there already and what can we do, is thinking about a Yeoman scale of permanence. So that's a scale of like looking at factors when you're surveying the land and thinking about the things that are most permanent, which are like, maybe we don't have the power to change, to things that are the least permanent, which could change quite easily. So on that scale, you've got like at the top as the most permanent, you've got climate. Obviously now there's a lot of talk about climate changing, but that's not something that we could do. We can't go to Iceland and easily just start growing tropical foods there outdoors. The next you've got is the landform. So again, you can do like earthworks, but you're not going to change a flat place into a hilly place, or vice versa. Then you've got water. So again, you've got like some kind of resources. Again, you can work with that, but yeah, there's some kind of like a finite amount of water. You've got access, which is an important thing to think about. Again, that's something you can work with. So now we're getting down the scale of permanence. You've got trees. So you may have trees, you can cut them, you can move them. So again, that's something that's flexible. Then you've got structures. Again, we have quite a lot of control in kind of looking at the big picture, what we can do with them. Then we've got subdivisions. So that's kind of like fences and how you divide off areas. And then the last one he has actually is soil. So that's actually something, you know, that can be damaged very quickly, as we can see with agriculture, but can also be repaired very quickly. So maybe when you're looking at a place, it's maybe not the biggest consideration, because it is something that with some care and attention and kind of good design, you can do quite a lot with. So maybe you'd want to think about the other things first and not worry too much about the soil. Also, you find that, yeah, land that's got kind of known very good quality agricultural soil is going to be much more expensive. So not many hills up here in Norfolk. What would you look for on flat land? So again, yeah, on flat land, you want to think, you know, most land, unless you're in the Netherlands, is not going to be completely flat, unless it was, yeah, under some kind of body of water. So yeah, you still want to think about how the water is moving across the land, what the drainage is like. So yeah, kind of when you talk about flat land, you still want to think about that it's probably not going to be completely flat. So you can still look at some of those considerations in terms of like the way the wind and the water are moving across the landscape.
Yeah, big parts of Norfolk were just reclaimed land.
So this is like under the...
It's not in the same way like certain parts of the Netherlands, which were totally reclaimed and, you know, which are technically underwater, you know, are below sea level. But it's land that's been dredged and whatnot over hundreds of years to reclaim. So it is, which is why it floods really easily.
Yeah, so is this land that was like kind of fen land, that was kind of inland fens, like around Cambridgeshire, that's all been dredged?
Yep.
Right. So yeah, then as you're saying, it would be important to think about like where the patterns of flooding are in terms of buying land.
Yep.
Because as far as I've seen, there's a lot of land which is on floodplains, and especially in the UK now, there are a lot of problems with that people have been given permission to build, and there's whole settlements on land that really shouldn't be built on because it is on a floodplain. Even if it's not on a yearly floodplain, you want to think about like the yearly patterns, you want to think about the 10-yearly patterns, the 100-year patterns. So you want to really think about the history of the land and get a bigger picture of it. Especially if it's in an area that you know is prone to flooding. Okay, another question. There's quite a lot of big agriculture around here. Would that be a problem with regard to chemicals that they use, etc.? Yeah, that is a big issue. It's something, yeah, we have to deal with here. We're also surrounded by agricultural land, and I think Marta also has to deal with that because she's surrounded by agricultural land. Yeah, to some extent, it's kind of quite pervasive everywhere, all these chemicals, like in terms of watershed, like where we are, we're like up on the hill. So to that, you know, because of that, we can kind of have some confidence that the chemicals are not going to come down the hill in with the water from like runoff from the fields. But then, yeah, if things are being sprayed, depending on the wind patterns, you can't be 100% sure that things are not being sprayed on you. So yeah, it's a difficult one to deal with. You know, one of the things is about putting up kind of windbreaks, having a higher canopy of trees that can kind of maybe help to filter kind of some of the things that would be coming down over the food that you're eating in the understory or on the ground level if you're planting something more like a food forest. If you are like downslope from an area where you think there could be chemical runoff, thinking about making like bioswales if you've got that kind of slope, so that you could have, yeah, like the swales on contour, and anything that's coming down could then go through wood chip. You could have like mushrooms growing there that could collect that and could help clean that groundwater. You could have willows which lock up toxins in their roots. So there's kind of different strategies you could think of about depending where those chemicals are coming from. And then, yeah, longer term strategy, which we're working on, is about, again, trying to make an example of permaculture, organic agriculture, that it is viable and that there's another alternative to using chemicals, and to try and influence people around you to think about the way they're working. It's not easy, but if they're smaller scale farmers, you might have a chance. I just want to take a check with the time where we're getting to. Any more questions or comments as we're coming to the end of this?
Sophie, I don't have a question, but I have a few things that I observed when I was looking for a land. Is that first thing is, I think our surroundings, like, you know, the community or village or people, if they're open, because I remember when I was looking for place in the center of Holland, I really liked some properties, very nice, but then they were in the Bible Belt area. So there you're not supposed to do anything on Sunday. And I was like hell bent on, I was telling my husband, like, okay, you know what, I really like this house. It's nice property, you know, so many trees are already there and all. He's like, no, this is Bible Belt. You don't understand here how it is, you know. You can't even mow your lawn on Sundays, it seems. I was like, that was quite shocking for me to, you know. So I think that is one thing to consider, I would feel. Surroundings, and also, like you mentioned, there was another property which had completely surrounded by tulip flower farm, and that is something I wouldn't go for, because again, you know, if people have pollen allergy, or, you know, especially they'll be spraying a lot of stuff on them, so that is also a big no-no. Yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, those are really good things to think about. For those of you like who've done design courses, you know that when we're doing the surveying, going into analysis stage, and we're looking at you know, we're doing the sector analysis. If you think about the different sectors, in that point you might be doing the sectors once you're already in that situation, you know, like where is the pollution, where is the noise disturbance, And you can kind of think about those things in advance, you know, like if you go to a property and think, okay, if I'm just doing a brief sector analysis, like what could be those things that could be disturbing me, but what could be also, you know, in terms of the surroundings, like nice sectors, you know, like I've got a wildlife sector there, I'm near a forest, I've got a social sector, there's another permaculture project near me that we could, you know, share resources. So you could already start, you know, using that as a tool to help you. I think for the time, I'm just going to go up to the break because I don't see Gray here, so we can just continue for like another 10 minutes. Yeah, I think another
I'm
interesting.
sure any of us could talk about fermenting.
Do you want? If you want, we can bring this to a close and we can speak about fermenting.
I mean, if people are interested in fermenting, then we can do something extra on that. That's any of us can do it. There's loads of us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think just one thing maybe to say at the end then before to bring it to a close. Another thing that I was just reflecting on was about the pattern understanding, and one of the patterns I came across recently. What's his name again, Rakesh? It's Christopher Alexander.
Yep.
I always wonder if I get it the right way around. Yeah, and so he's got this really interesting book about like different patterns using to design houses in human settlements. And one of them, I can't remember the number, but basically the idea is like, don't build your house on the best piece of land. Often people get a piece of land and they find the nicest spot that gets like the sunshine, that's got very good soil, that's flat, that's lovely, and they put their house there. But once you've put your house there, it's not the best piece of land anymore. You've kind of like spoiled it. And so one of the examples given was like farming communities in the mountains in China, and they keep, because they've got such a small amount of like very good land, they keep that for food growing because they value that, and they have their houses kind of up the side of the mountains on stilts, because they're like, you can build a house anywhere, it doesn't matter, but this is the place that we can grow our food to nourish ourselves. So I think that's a really nice way to think about it. And also to think about, you know, like a lot of us want to have a beautiful house in a very unspoiled piece of land. Let's go to like virgin forest and build something. But at the same time, yeah, maybe we want to think about the land that's already been damaged by human activity and mistakes, and think about what we could do to regenerate that land and leave the places that are very beautiful to get on with it, because they don't really need our intervention. You know, a mature forest doesn't need a permaculture project, but maybe, yeah, something that's been damaged by agriculture does. And the last thing when thinking about choosing land is that maybe, yeah, we don't always choose the land. Maybe sometimes the land chooses us, because we can be very kind of right side thinking about it and analytical and say, I want land that's south facing, that has this, that has that, that's this many kilometers from this place. But sometimes, yeah, we come across a place, and this is my personal experience, and that place kind of catches you, and you feel like that place needs someone to do something there, and that's your kind of task. So I think it's also nice to be open to that way of kind of, yeah, having that intuition that you come to a place and it kind of doesn't let you go, and yeah, it chooses you. So yeah, I think from both sides it's good to be aware of those kind of, yeah, your ideals, and how you could design something based on, you know, like the kind of the best situation, but also be open that, yeah, you might be surprised by something, and then that is turning the problem into a solution, and then you can get creative. So okay, hopefully that's been useful for you, Sarah. And yeah, if there's any more questions, we can also like chat about that on Facebook or Zulip or anywhere else.
I like these ideas a lot, Sophie. Thanks.
Welcome. Yeah, and I hope, yeah, for you guys who are searching for a place, that you, yeah, find a really good one and you can get creative. Okay, so Rakesh, would you like to start saying anything about fermentation? What have you been working on at the moment?
Right now, what's fermenting is I was given like some melon like not watermelon, but a melon, yellow melon. And rather than throw the skin away, I thought, well, let's try and make some vinegar from the skin. So right now I'm making, yeah, vinegar from melon skin. I have no idea how it's bubbling away. It's bubbling away, so something's happening. I haven't tasted it because obviously I'm fasting. But my Jerusalem artichokes, I just dug up some more, and more. And even today, as I was digging my pond, I found more Jerusalem artichokes. And so yeah, so I've been fermenting those. So I've tried 2 different ways. One is with starting it with turmeric and chilies and spices and salt, obviously, in water, and fermenting it that way. And the other way I've just tried doing now, which is fermenting it first in just saline, just doing a lacto ferment and then adding the spices afterwards. Just want to see if there's any difference. I'm not sure that there will be, but yeah, certainly the first way worked really well. And so for those who are not used to fermentation, what you're doing with lactobacillus fermentation in this style with a wet brine is you add anywhere between 2 and 4% of the weight of whatever it is you're trying to ferment of salt. So if you've got 100 grams of whatever Jerusalem artichoke, you add 2 to 4 grams of salt into water. And what's really important is, so what you're doing is you're creating a saline solution, and only certain bacilli, only certain bacteria will be able to survive in those conditions. And the type that survives in there are the type that then protect and essentially they're the ones that ferment your veg and what have you. So what's really important is that whatever you're fermenting always has to remain in the water and below the level of water. So you need some way that you're going to put something on top to make sure that everything remains underneath. Otherwise, anything that floats on the top potentially could get mold, which in many cases is not a big problem. But there's certain types of mold that really are a problem. And so why take the risk? So yeah, just make sure you push everything down. Some things you'll find ferment without the need for for water. So if they've already got a lot of water in it, you can pretty much do what we call a dry brine. So so when I fast, I break my fast with lime water. And so I have all these lime skins left over. So I chop them as fine as I can, cut them really small. I just sprinkle salt on top of it, obviously add some chili, and then leave it in the sun. And literally they'll ferment that way. And then, yeah, it just makes the most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful lime pickle, but without any oils, without any, it's just lacto fermented. So yeah, so there's a few different ways to do it, but the simple thing, the most simplest form of lacto fermentation is you're trying to encourage, as I say, this lactobacillus by creating a saline condition. So yeah, you could do it with almost anything.
Carrying out to the studies to get insights into how sort of conditions could improve.
Right, sorry, was that someone asking a question there, or someone's back in the background? Anyway, I see Martha has her hand up.
Yes. Okay, so you said that there's certain fermentations that have enough liquid. You don't have to add the water saline solution. But and so you said you did the lemons for that, or do you still want to make sure that they're submerged? So you pressure them? No.
No.
Is that okay?
No, not necessarily. It's typically a shorter fermentation, and you add more salt, so you're probably more at the 4%, 5%. To tell you the truth, I just kind of just sprinkle it on, and it's just, I've never ever weighed my salt. It's just the feeling. Yeah, that should do.
How many days do you usually do for the lime one?
Depends how hot it is, but in the summer, 3-4 days. In the winter, 2 weeks. You'll see it changes color. You'll see, and you'll see it changes color, and then it's ready. So to tell you the truth, I don't even count, but I
Yeah.
think it's like that. Where you are, probably take half an hour. I don't know.
Yes, I was thinking that.
It's like making dosa, fermenting like Indian, like you do rice and lentils and we ferment that. In India, you do it in the morning, you're having it for lunch. It's like bang. You do it in London, sometimes it takes 5 days before it's fermented. So yeah, it totally depends on the weather. But you'll see it change. The other really good one without water is radish, the long mooli daikon, because it's so full of water already. You can quite literally just chop it up, add some salt to it. I add chili and stuff to it immediately, and you'll see the water level just rises. It almost gets to the top within a day, within like even 3 hours. It's amazing to watch. Yeah. Any other questions, or what else have people been fermenting recently?
Yeah, Joe had a question here about the maximum amount of time that you could keep a ferment. And I was just saying I would keep eating it until it changes its appearance somehow. Like if it starts looking different, like discoloring or smelling weird or tasting weird, that would be my kind of marker. But yeah, if you've been eating something for a year and it's still fine, especially if you keep it in a cold place, like if it's in a very cold cellar or a fridge, you've basically like stopped the kind of active process. So it's going to be kind of preserved at the kind of point that you've got it to, so it should be okay, yeah, for quite a while.
Yeah, so many greens that are really easy to do. Actually, one of my favorites from last year was taking slow Pruna spinosa and lacto fermenting those. They were fantastic. I lacto fermented my cherries. Still got some of those. They're wonderful. And there's a kind of Japanese style where, I don't know if people have heard of umeboshi. The umeboshi vinegar, then umeboshi plums. So the way they do that is they do this kind of wet brine, dry it out, wet brine, dry it out, wet brine, dry it, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, and then leave it, and then last for decades. After doing that several times, it just lasts for decades. You don't even need to leave it in a fridge. You can leave it anywhere and it will just last.
When you do those like stone fruits, do you remove the stones, Rakesh, or do you leave them
in? The only times I've done it, because my Prunus mume hasn't actually fruited yet. I think it's going to fruit this year for the first time, and so I've never done it with that. But I've done it with cherries, and I invariably leave cherries in there. So so 2 times where I lacto ferment the cherries. First of all, when they fall off the tree and they're unripe, so they're raw, then I'll do this kind of then I'll do either dry brine, or in fact, mostly I do it with dry brine, and it's lovely, it's fantastic. But obviously you need to be a little bit careful because the seed does contain a certain amount of cyanide. And you just be careful not to bite into it, and if you do, and if it tastes really bitter, I think, is that the right word?
it's really bitter when it's getting bad. Yeah.
That's the cyanide. So you just spit it out.
Yeah, it's like eating old almonds. They've got the same taste.
Yep.
They become really bitter. Yeah, because I was imagining, knowing you don't remove the seeds.
Nah,
I didn't
can't
imagine
be
you
bothered.
doing that. And I was thinking we've got all these junky here, you know, the Mirabelle plums that grow wild everywhere. And they'd probably be nice when they're like still green to do a dry brine on them.
Yeah.
Something else.
I can imagine making a really great vinegar from.
Yeah.
Because then you wouldn't even need sugar.
Yeah, when they're like very sweet, then you've got like the sugary part, and when they're green, they're like crunchy. So yeah, I'm gonna try that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. Green, lacto ferment the green ones.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Just got to find some. Hopefully the frost didn't catch them all because they're really early flowering here. So we'll see. Yeah. Okay, we've got the break time now. So yeah, we've got a 10 minutes break, and then after the break, we've got Steve speaking about Zone 0. So that's at 5 past.